Encyclopedia of Electronic Medical Terminologies. Part 4. Translation, Main Words of Human Physiology Books. 1. Important words and list of abbreviations. 2. To human physiology. To reach. In. Into. In which. On. At. Of. Of group of. Of there. For. Fraction. Composed of. Made up. Contains. Content. On. On both sides. By. If. There. The body. The concentration. A non-diffusible. A semi-permeable. Definition. Definite. Indefinite. Present. Exist. There is. There are. Present inside. Present outside. As. Thus. Except. With. Without. Within. Less than. Either. When there is. Direct. Indirect. Directly. Example. Increase. Decrease. Etc. etc. That is, in this example. For example. Total body water, TBW. Intracellular fluid, ICF. Extracellular fluid, ECF. 2. Introduction to Human Physiology. Human physiology. Concerned with the study. Normal functions. Different parts of human body. Specific characteristics. Specific characteristics. Mechanisms of human body. A living being. Body composition. In the average adult male, the body is composed of water, proteins, related substances, fat, minerals, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates have little structural function in the cell, except as part of glycoprotein molecule. But their major role is nutrition of the cell, organization of the body. The body is formed of group of systems: nervous system, endocrine system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, digestive system, urogenital system, musculoskeletal system. Each system formed of group organs, tissues, cells. Thus, the basic living unit of the body is the cell. The human body contains about 100 trillion cells. Body, system, organs, tissues, cells. Cell physiology. The cell is composed of cell membrane, protoplasm, cytoplasm, nucleus, lysosomes, peroxisomes, Golgi apparatus, centrioles, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, microfilaments, microtubules. 3. Cell membrane. Discussed later. Discussed in histology. Protoplasm. Composed of cytoplasm. Contains organelles. Endoplasmic reticulum. Golgi apparatus. Mitochondria. Lysosomes. Peroxisomes. Centrioles. Microtubules. Microfilaments. Nucleus. Fluid. Rather than solid matrix. Fluidity makes it more flexible. Semi-permeable. Allows some substances to pass and prevents others. Structure composed of lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, Lipid bilayer. Continuous over entire surface. Provides barrier. Movement of water-soluble substances. Substances. Composition. Made up of phospholipids. Phospholipids. The major lipid in cell membrane and cholesterol is phospholipids. Membrane. Cholesterol. Molecules. Thickness. Head. Phosphate radical of phospholipids. Relatively water-soluble, hydrophilic. Exposed to water present inside or outside the cell. Tail. Free fatty acid, FFA. It is present in the water-poor interior of the membrane. Dissolved in the phospholipid bilayer. Function. Determine permeability. Lipid layer. Soluble substances. Determine the fluidity of the membrane. Form. Continuous layer. Globular. Masses floating. Bilayer. Integral proteins. 4. Extend through the whole thickness. Extend through the whole thickness. Functions. They act as ion channels. The passage of ions. Carriers. Transport of substances. Glucose. Amino acids. Receptors. Fraction. Hormones. Enzymes. Peripheral proteins. Attached. Either outside or more commonly inside. Integral proteins. Act mainly. Carbohydrates. Cell glycocalyx. Present on the outer surface. In most cells. Loose coat. Entire surface. Called glycocalyx. Combined with proteins. Glycoproteins. Combined with lipids. Glycolipids. Many of them are negatively charged. Overall negative surface charge. Attach cells to each other. Act as receptors. Some enter in immune response. Carbohydrates. Phospholipid. Molecule. 5. Intercellular communications. Cells communicate with each other by sending signals or chemical messenger to each other. There are 2 types of communication. Direct, electrical, communication. Indirect, chemical, communication. In which the messenger, mainly depolarization, moves from cell to cell, via gap junctions, without entering channels running across the intercellular space, connecting one cell to another, permit the rapid propagation of action potential from cell to cell, present in cardiac smooth MS. The most common type of communication. Cells secrete chemical messenger to affect other cells by binding to receptor protein on cell membrane, cytoplasm or nucleus. There are 4 types. Neural, synaptic, communication, called neurotransmitter, is released from postsynaptic neuron passes. Synaptic cleft, binds to receptor on postsynaptic neuron. Endocrine communication, called hormone, secreted to blood, affect far cells. Paracrine communication, chemical messenger, mostly metabolic products, histamine and prostaglandins. Interstitial fluid, affects nearby cells. Autocrine communication, binds to receptor. Neurotrans, presynaptic, presyn. Postsynaptic, postsyn. Synaptic, syn, cleft. Communication, com. Blood vessel. Autocrine. 6. Membrane transport. Passive transport. Diffusion. Definition. It is transport of substance across semipermeable membrane down its electrochemical gradient. Another definition. It is the process by which a gas or a substance in a solution expands. Random motion. Particles. Fill. Available volume. Criteria. Occurs. Down. Concentration. Chemical. Electrical. Pressure gradient. Does not need. Energy. Semipermeable membrane. Factors. Affecting rate. Directly proportional. Directly proportional, gradient, graduate. Chemical. Temperature, temp. Increases. Random motion. Surface area. Permeability of the membrane. Surface area. Thickness. Permeability. Inversely proportional. Inversely propor. Molecular weight. Molecular size. Square root of the molecular size. 7. Thickness of the membrane. Distance across which diffusion takes place. Types of diffusion. Simple diffusion. Carrier. Concerned. Lipid-soluble substances. Small water substances. Ions. Occurs through. Fatty acids. Glycerol. Urea. Lipid solubility. Large quantities. Did not exist. Proton channels. Permeation. Small water-soluble substance. Types of channels. Leak channels. Non-gated channels. Has no gate. Continuously. Opened. Through which ions continuously leak. Channels. Gated channels. Voltage-gated channels. Result. Change. Potential. Voltage. Ligand-gated. Chemical-gated. Binding. Ligation. Receptor. Channel protein. Acetylcholine-gated ion. Neuromuscular junction. Diffusion through. The lipid bilayer. Permeation. 8. Facilitated. Carrier-mediated. Definition. Carrier protein. Concerned. Large molecules. Glucose. Most amino acids. Mechanism. Large enough. Specific molecule. Binding. Receptor. Integral proteins. Widening of the inner part of the channel. Transport. Molecule. Differences. Between. Simple diffusion. Facilitated diffusion. Lipid soluble. Lipid insoluble. Does not need carrier. No structural specificity. Because there is no carrier. Saturation. With increasing inhibition. No competitive inhibition. Concentration gradient. Without limit, no carrier. Needs carrier. High structural specificity. Each carrier. Competitive inhibition. Similar molecules. Complete. Saturation has a maximum limit. Increasing the concentration gradient till all the carriers available substance become saturated. Does not increase after that. More sensitive to temperature changes. Binding of the substance. Less sensitive to temperature changes. 9. Special types of passive transport. Osmosis. Diffusion of water. Solvent. From area. Less concentrated. Solution. More solvent. More concentrated solution. Less solvent. Osmotic pressure. Pressure needed to stop osmosis. Osmotic. Pressure depends. Number. Rather than the size. Particles. low concentrated solution, high concentrated solution, diffusion of water, osmosis, takes place, proton channels, high kinetic energy, penetrate the lipid, bilayer, bullets, hydrophobic characters, filtration, caused by difference in hydrostatic, arterial, systemic, glomerular capillaries, kidney, glomerular filtrate, filtrate, solvent drag, solvent through the membrane, reabsorption, tubules. 10. Active, transport, substance, against, electrochemical, gradient, criteria, occurs, concentration, chemical, electrical or pressure, uphill, needs energy, types of active transport, primary active transport, electrochemical, specific carrier, produces energy, exam, pumps, coupled with pumping, mitochondria, muscle fibers, in addition, sarcoplasmic reticulum, maintained at very low level, intracellularly, second half of distal tubules, collecting ducts, tubular lumen, all cells. 11. Secondary active transport, active, secondary, passive transport, another substance, chemical gradient, monomers, same direction, opposite directions, sodium glucose, sodium amino acids, occurs, intestine, renal tubules, mechanism, glucose, common carrier, moves, electrochemical, counter-transport, renal tubular, common carrier, receptor, surface of the carrier, macromolecules, large particles, bacteria are transported to the inside of the cell, pinocytosis, cell drinking, inner vesicle, containing, occurs in most body cells. 12. Mechanism, attachment, specific receptor on the cell, concentrated in small pits, called coated pits. The entire pit invaginates inwards by action of contractile elements. Borders, close over, pinocytic vesicle, separate, cytoplasm, contractile, invagination, vesicle formation, separation, phagocytosis, vesicle, cell eating, large particles, bacteria, phagocytic cell, white blood cells, neutrophils, microphages, monocytes, macrophages, tissue macrophages. Mechanisms, essentially, in two aspects. Phagocytic vesicle contains particle, hence the name can-eating. Ingested substance, digestible. There will be an additional step. Lysosomes, phagocytic vesicles, release, enzymes, vesicle digest. Ingested substance, exocytosis, cell excretion. Mechanism, endocytosis. 13. Donan effect, Gibbs-Donan equilibrium. Non-diffusible ion, one side, semi-permeable. Diffusible ions redistribute themselves. Predictable way, electrical neutrality. Diffusible, non-diffusible, equilibrium. Donan and Gibbs showed presence, distribute, equilibrium, concentration, ratios, equal. Their concentration products on both sides are equal. Gibbs-Dunning equation. Effects of Dunning equilibrium. Preserved on both sides of the membrane. Containing. Increase. Osmotically. Active particles. Systemic. Glomerular capillaries. Diffuse. Glomerular. Filtrate. Slightly. 14. Body water. Body weight. Water constitutes about 60% of body weight. Adult male. Compartments. Total body water, TBW. Divided into 2 compartments. Intracellular fluid, ICF. Constitute about 40% of body weight. Total body water. Extracellular fluid, ECF. Constitute about 20% of body weight. Interstitial fluid. Intravascular fluid, plasma. Blood vessels. Internal environment. Normal variation. Variation with age. Infants and children. Mainly. Ratio. Easier. Dehydration. Dehydration develops. More. Rapid. Severe. Variation with sex. Is less in females than males. Content. Body fat is relatively free of water. Variation with fat content in body. Is less in obese persons. 15. Distribution of ions. Cations, plus VE ions. Anions, -VE ions. Phosphates, PO43. Proteins. Nearly similar. Higher. Functions, importance, of body water. Medium for most biological processes. Digestion. Essential component. Digestive secretions. Medium for all secretions to work. Absorption. Renal tubules and venous end of capillaries. Excretion. Through kidney and skin, sweat. Glomeruli of the kidney and arterial capillaries. Medium for exchange process. Exchange. Alveolar membrane. Lungs. Exchange of nutrients. Waste products. Capillary wall. Exchange of ions. Medium for chemical. Enzymatic reactions. Metabolic processes. Transport medium. Transport of substances. Hormones. Vitamins. Different parts of the body. 16. Regulation of body temperature. Through heat distribution and evaporation. Essential for homeostatic processes as regulation of pH. Osmolarity. Lubricant. Potential spaces. Pleurapericardium. Peritoneum. Motive medium in the eye. Mechanical buffer. Shock absorber. Distributes mechanical trauma. Applied to any part of the body. Large area. So it becomes less harmful. Measurement of body water compartments. Done using indicator. Dilution principle. Injected intravenously. Distribute uniformly. Compartment is calculated. Equation. Amount of substance injected. Volume of compartment. Concentration. Antipairing. Deuterium oxide. Tritium oxide. Isotopically labeled water. Water mix. Inulin. Sucrose. Mannitol. Thiosulfate. Thiocyanate. Plasma. Antipyrine. 17. Plasma volume measured. Does not readily penetrate capillary membrane. Remain in vascular system. Blue or albumin labeled. Radioactive iodine. Homeostasis. Volume, water content. Ions. Temperature. Interstitial. Narrow limits. Chemical or physical properties of internal environment. Most biological systems, directly or indirectly, maintain homeostasis. That is, to keep the internal environment optimum. For cellular function. Systems supply. Remove. Nutrients. Blood. Circulating fluid through all parts of the body. Kidney. Regulates. Skin. Regulate temp. Remove some waste products. Skeletal. Obtain food. Escape from dangers. 18. The function of these biological systems is regulated by two control systems. Nervous system. Rapid control system. Endocrinal, hormonal system. Slow control system. Feedback control of the homeostatic. Feedback control means the control of certain function by the resultant effect of this function. Types. Negative feedback control. Function inhibits. Leads to stability of internal environment. Examples. Blood glucose level. Blood glucose. Re-insulin secretion. Glucose. Utilization by tissues. Blood glucose back to normal. Regulation. Hyperventilation. Back to normal. Regulation of arterial blood pressure, ABP. Normal. Positive feedback control. Less common. Function stimulates. Stimulates itself. It leads to instability of internal environment. Vicious circle, death cycles. Heart failure. Weakness of beam. Heat stroke. Coronary blood. Cardiac output. Positive feedback can sometimes be useful. Operate in the body to complete certain function. Process of parturition, labor. Stretch of uterine cervix. Reflex uterine contraction. Descend. More stretch of cervix. More uterine contraction. More descend of baby. So on until labor is complete. 19. Autonomic nervous system. Divisions of the nervous system. Anatomically, nervous system is divided into central nervous system, CNS. Brain. Lies inside the skull. Composed of two cerebral hemispheres. Outer cerebral cortex. Internal structures. Basal ganglia. Thalamus. Hypothalamus. Brainstem. Consisted of midbrain. Pons. Medulla oblongata. Cerebellum. Spinal cord. Composed of 5 regions. Each region is divided into segments. It lies inside the vertebral column. Cervical region divided into 8 segments. Thoracic region divided into 12 segments. Lumbar region divided into 5 segments. Sacral region, divided into 5 segments. Coccygeal region, consisting only of 1 segment. Peripheral nervous system. Arise from. Supply different parts of the body. Cranial nerves, arise from the brain and are 12 pairs. Spinal nerves, arise from the spinal cord, 1 pair from each segment, thus there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Nerve fibers running in the spinal nerves enter the spinal cord through the dorsal, posterior, root of the spinal nerve. Have their mother cells in the dorsal root ganglion. Motor, efferent. Carry the impulse. Leave the spinal cord through the ventral, anterior. Have their mother cells in the anterior horn, for somatic motor. Lateral horn, for autonomic motor. 40. Blood. Physical properties. Color. Arterial blood is bright red in color due to presence of oxyhemoglobin. Venous blood is dark, or bluish, red in color due to presence of reduced hemoglobin. Specific gravity: 1090 for blood cells, 1030 for plasma, 1060 for whole blood. Specific gravity for water equals 1000. Viscosity: it is a physical property by means of which fluid resist any change in their shape. Viscosity of water equals 1, that of plasma 2, and viscosity of whole blood equals 4. It is mainly due to red blood cells and plasma proteins, mainly fibrinogen. Blood viscosity is important for the peripheral resistance which is necessary for maintaining normal arterial blood pressure. Osmotic pressure: about 5000 Hg. It is mainly due to crystalloids. The colloid osmotic pressure. Plasma protein. Albumin. General functions: 1. Transport function. Blood transports 1 O2 and CO2. 2. Digested absorbed food. 3. Waste products. 4. Active substances as vitamins and hormones. 2. Defensive function. White blood cells attack the invading pathogenic organisms and produce antibodies against them. 3. Hemostatic function. When a blood vessel is injured, blood loss is prevented by the formation of platelet plug and blood clot. 4. Homeostatic function. Blood helps to maintain the composition of the interstitial fluid, internal environment, constant. 41. Composition. Blood is a modified connective tissue composed of 1. Cellular component, 45%. 1. Red blood corpuscles, RBCs, or erythrocyte. 2. White blood corpuscles, WBCs, or leukocytes. 3. Platelets or thrombocytes. 2. Fluid component, plasma 55%. Composed of A. Water 90%. B. Dissolved substances 10%. 1. Plasma proteins. 2. Other organic substances as nutrients and waste products. 3. Inorganic substances. Packed cell volume, hematocrit. It is the percentage ratio of RBCs volume to total blood volume equals 45%. Total blood volume of an adult male is nearly 5 liters, about 8% of body weight. Plasma proteins. Plasma 55%. RBCs 45%. Concentration. Average. Composition, types. Concentration. Albumin. Globulin. Divided into fibrinogen. Prothrombin. Site of formation. Synthesis. Fibrinogen. Prothrombin and the most of the globulins, alpha and beta globulins, are formed in liver. Gamma globulins. Globulins. Formed by plasma cells present in the lymphoid tissue in the body, in lymph nodes, liver, spleen, bone marrow. 42. Functions. Specific functions. That is related to a specific type of plasma proteins. 1. Osmotic pressure of plasma. Albumin is responsible for most, 80%, of this osmotic pressure. Because it has the highest concentration and smallest molecular size. That is, great number of molecules. The total osmotic pressure of plasma equals 5000 Hg. It is due to crystalloids and colloids, plasma proteins. The crystalloid are more powerful, responsible for most of plasma osmotic pressure, but less important regarding movement of fluid across the capillary wall. This is because crystalloids are present in plasma and tissue fluid in the same concentration, so their net osmotic effect is zero. The colloids, plasma proteins, are less powerful, responsible only for 25–30% 30 Hg of the plasma osmotic pressure. But more important, because plasma proteins are present only in plasma. Tissue fluid is almost free of proteins. So some fluid is reabsorbed from tissue fluid to the plasma by the osmotic pressure of plasma proteins. Crystalloids equal to plasma. Tissue fluid. 2. Defensive functions. Gamma globulins are the antibodies that protect the body against the microorganisms and their toxins. 3. Viscosity of the plasma. Fibrinogen is the main plasma protein responsible for it because of its elongated molecules and large molecular weight. Viscosity is important for maintaining the blood pressure. 4. Clotting of blood is the function of fibrinogen and prothrombin B non-specific functions. 5. Buffering function. Buffer system is composed of weak acid and its salt with a strong base. 43. Abnormal pH of blood, 7.4 slightly alkaline. Plasma proteins are present in the form of proteinic acid, weak acid, salt with a strong base. Thus it acts as a buffer system, preventing excessive changes in pH. For example, lactic acid, relatively strong, proteinic acid, weak acid. Strong, alkali. Proteinic acid. 6. Carrier function. Plasma proteins acts as carriers for many substances. 1. Vitamins, for example vitamin A. 2. Hormones, for example thyroxine and insulin. 3. Metals, for example iron and Cu. 4. Ions, for example calcium. Significance of this carrier function. 1. The combined form acts as a reservoir from which the free substance is slowly released to tissues. 2. Prevent filtration of substances in the kidney and loss in urine. 7. Regulation of capillary permeability. The pores in the capillary walls are partially blocked by plasma proteins. Thus decreased plasma proteins is associated with increased capillary permeability. 8. Protein reserve. Plasma proteins acts as a reserve protein used during starvation to supply the tissues with amino acids needed for protein synthesis. Albumin. Ratio of albumin to globulin in plasma. Normally it is from 1.1 to 1.8. It decreases in cases of decreased albumin or increased globulin. Decreased albumin results from 1. Decrease intake as in malnutrition and malabsorption. 2. Decrease synthesis as in liver diseases. 3. Increase loss as in A. Kidney disease, K. Loss in urine. B. Severe burns, loss from skin. 4. Increase catabolism as in fevers and trauma including surgery. Increased globulin occur in 1. Chronic inflammation as chronic hepatitis. 2. Some collagen diseases as rheumatoid arthritis. Both lead to increased immunoglobulins. 44. Red blood corpuscles, RBCs, erythrocyte. 5 million, 3 in adult males. 4.5 million, 3 in adult females. More in newly born infants. Shape circular biconcave. Non-nucleated discs. This characteristic shape biconcavity. 1. Increases the surface area in relation to volume. 2. Enables it to pass through narrow capillaries without rupturing during deformation. Size, 90 cubic microns in volume, 7.5 microns in diameter. Origin, site of formation. In fetus RBCs are formed in the liver and spleen. In children RBCs are formed in bone marrow of all bones. In adults, by age of 20, RBCs are formed in bone marrow of membranous bones, flat bones. For example sternum, ribs, skull and vertebrae. This is called red or active bone marrow, while bone marrow of long bones in adults becomes fatty and is called yellow or inactive bone marrow. Production, genesis, of RBCS, erythropoiesis, pluripotent hematopoietic stem cell, uncommitted stem cell, in bone marrow. Stimulated by erythropoietin. Proerythroblast. Basophil. Erythroblast, early normoblast. Polycrotophil. Intermediate normoblast. Orthochromatic. Reticulocyte. Remnants of Golgi protein and mitochondria. 45. Short lifespan of reticulocyte. They constitute only about 1% of RBCS in normal blood. The whole maturation process takes about 5 days. Lifespan: 120 days plus minus 7 days. Factors affecting erythropoiesis. 1. Oxygen supply to tissues. Oxygen transport is the primary function of RBCS. Thus the primary stimulus for erythropoiesis is the decreased oxygen supply to tissues, that is, hypoxia. Mechanism. Hypoxia stimulates secretion of erythropoietin hormone mainly from the kidney, 90%, and also from liver, 10%. Erythropoietin stimulate erythropoiesis in the bone marrow. It mainly stimulate the production of proerythroblasts from the hematopoietic stem cell, but also stimulate the other stages of erythropoiesis. Erythropoietin is glycoprotein in nature and is inactivated in liver. Liver. Hypoxia. Erythropoietin. Bone marrow. 2. Hormones. 1. Androgens, for example testosterone. Erythropoiesis through A. Direct effect on bone marrow. B. Indirect effect through stimulation of erythropoietin release. 2. Thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. Stimulate the metabolism of all body cells including the bone marrow. Hypothyroidism is associated with anemia, while hyperthyroidism is associated with polycythemia. 3. Glucocorticoids, for example cortisone. Stimulate the general metabolism of all cells including the bone marrow. 3. Diet. 1. Proteins needed for formation of globin, part of hemoglobin. 2. Vitamins especially vitamin B12, cyanocobalamin, and folic acid. 46. They are needed for RBCS maturation factors. Because both of them are essential for synthesis of DNA. Deficiency of these factors lead to failure of nuclear maturation and cell division. 3. Metals. A. Iron in the ferrous state is needed for the formation of Hem, part of hemoglobin. B. Copper acts as a catalyst in hemoglobin formation. C. Cobalt stimulate erythropoiesis by stimulating erythropoietin release. 4. Organs. 1. Liver essential for normal erythropoiesis because it A. helps in formation of globin, part of hemoglobin. B. Stores iron, copper, and vitamin B12. C. Synthesizes erythropoietin. 2. Bone marrow it is the only site in adults for normal erythropoiesis. 3. Kidney synthesizes erythropoietin. Function of RBCS. 1. Function of membrane, to enclose hemoglobin. If hemoglobin is free in the plasma, it will lead to many disorders that will be discussed with incompatible blood transfusion. 2. Function of contents. A. Hemoglobin. 1. Carry O2 and CO2. 2. Strong buffer system. B. Carbonic anhydrase enzyme catalyze the reaction between CO2 and H2O. Hemoglobin content 15 g/100 ml blood in adults, on average, 16 gm/100 ml blood in adult males and 14 gm in adult females. Structure: each hemoglobin molecule consists of 4 subunits. Each subunit is composed of a heme group attached to a polypeptide chain of amino acids. Heme group is composed of iron protoporphyrin. Al heme group. Subunits: polypeptide chain. Hemoglobin subunit. HB molecule, 4 polypeptide chains plus 4 heme groups.